Getting to this video, continuing with my Leica Q3 series, we are going to be talking about image quality coming from the Q3. And in this video, I'm going to walk you through a photo shoot that I've done a couple of weeks ago at a marina nearby my house, where I really got to put the Leica Q3 through its paces. I got to shoot day in, day out, morning all the way through sunset. We're also going to be talking about the newly improved autofocus of the Leica Q3, where we're going to be comparing human detection autofocus versus animal autofocus, object, and so on. I'm also going to be attaching a link in the description where you can download all the images that we are going to be discussing in this video so you can play with them at home. I know that a lot of you guys got your Leica Q3, but you still haven't got it, so at least you can actually apply some of the exercises that we're going to be showing you in this video. Last but not least, I want to tell you that the metering mode that I use in most of the images in this video, which is the metering mode that I use most of the time, is actually highlight weighted metering mode. Now, highlight weighted metering mode is going to protect the highlights, and everything else may actually be underexposed, but we're going to also see how well you can recover a lot of that detail from the shadows. So enough talking, let's go. All right, the first thing that we're gonna be doing in here, I'm gonna show you an image, and this image is going to be a representation of why you should choose highlight weighted metering mode. Now, this is the metering mode that I use the most, and it's going to protect the highlights, making sure that, for example, in this picture, the sky is properly exposed, and of course, therefore, you're gonna get a little bit of underexposure in the shadows. Now, the other metering mode that I used often, other than the highlight weighted mode, is going to be center weighted, and I tend to use that metering mode. For example, if I'm shooting a portrait and I have a bright sky in the background, well, my priority in this case is actually to expose for the person that I'm photographing. Let's actually dive into this image so I can demonstrate what I'm telling you. One of the things that I want to do right now is trying to recover the sky and see what we can recover in the highlights. Now, if I actually bring the exposure down, you're going to see that right over here, I start getting a gray rim around the sun. And if we bring down all the way the exposure, you're gonna notice that we have completely clipped the sun. Also some of the surrounding where the blue meets the white. And this is the reason why I would recommend that you stick, at least when you're shooting in bright situations, to highlight weighted mode. That way you're gonna be able to protect those skies and those highlights. And the next thing that I wanna show you is how much recoverability we actually have in the shadows. And for that, we're gonna jump to the next image, which is this one right over here. And as you can see, this image is actually somewhat properly exposed. Definitely I use highlight weighted mode in this one. And I am going to be hitting here the reset button. And this is pretty much what this image looks like straight out of the camera. There are some people right over here on the left-hand side. We can barely tell the details of their faces. And when it comes to the water, even though we have some highlights, we have lost a lot of the details in the ripple. Now, for a lot of people, this may actually be a great exposure, specifically if you're gonna be turning this image in black and white, but we're not actually doing black and white right now, so I wanna show you the recoverability that you're gonna get in the shadows. So the first thing that I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna pull the shadow slider all the way to the right. And as you can see, we have actually recovered a lot of the details here in the water, whereas before it was like this, pitch black. Right now, you can tell a lot of the details. And again, I'm here pixel level, and as you can see, we can even tell the details pretty clear, and the noise is actually very, very minimal. Of course, if we zoom in, we don't even see that noise, and if you would print this image full size at 60 megapixel, this image is gonna look incredible. Now, if I would actually edit this image, what I would do, I'm just gonna reset that shadow slider. In this case, I think that I will probably try to crop and remove that thing from here. This is a heavy crop, but just for the sake of this demonstration. So one of the features that I use from Lightroom is gonna be the auto. In a lot of the cases, it does a pretty good job. In a lot of the cases, it's completely far-fetched. Now, for example, one of the things that I notice is that the clouds, in my opinion, they look a little bit overexposed. We can see right here in the histogram that we do have some overexposure. And I think that if we move this highlight slider all the way to the left, this image looks a little bit better, and we can see that the image is not clipping anymore. In this photo, what I would do is actually come all the way down to the calibration mode, and this is something that I like to do even before I start grading the image, because a lot of the time by simply moving the hue from the blue towards the left, you start shifting the blues to the teal, and you start shifting the yellows to a much more richer orange. In a lot of situations, this is more than enough for me to say this picture is good to go. Now, one of the things that I want to tweak, I think that Lightroom has done kind of like an overdone job, is in the shadows. I wouldn't actually recover that much of the shadows. But in my opinion, this is an image that looks pretty good. One of the other things that I like to do is I like to add warmth at the end of my color grading. I just like to add a little bit of yellow, and what I do is I just put a node right there in the middle of the blue channel curve, and I pull down a little bit. Now the blacks, probably the blacks I would actually lift rather than the shadows, so we have a little bit more of detail in the pretty dark areas. And then you can play with things such as clarity, which I try not to abuse it. In a lot of cases, I go in the opposite direction, so I get that blooming effect, and you're gonna see that over here. Just gonna exaggerate it a little bit. You can see how in the areas of high contrast, you get that blooming effect like if you're using a Pro Mist filter. Let me show the before and after. So this is how this image started, and this is right now. Incredible amount of recoverability in the shadows. What I like about the Leica Q3 is that the details in the shadow do not carry a lot of noise when you recover. So that's actually pretty good. Now we have another image right here. I believe it's the same boat from the other angle. And a lot of the times, you don't have to do much to these images. Like I mentioned before, yes, when you actually expose for the highlights, definitely the sky is gonna be the priority. So everything else is gonna be underexposed. But in some cases, it only takes for you to tweak a little bit of that shadow slider. And for a lot of people, this is gonna be more than enough. Another thing that I could do, in this case, what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna play directly with a blue color right here under HSL. And what I will do is I will shift actually that blue, probably desaturate it also a little bit more. I don't like the blue to be so exaggerated. And sometimes I may actually increase luminance or decrease it. Now, in this case, if I wanna make the clouds pop a little bit more, I would actually decrease it a little bit more. And sometimes something that I do is play a little bit with the dehazing as well and bring the contrast towards the left. Now, like I mentioned before, the clarity sometimes, I like to pull it back a little bit just to get that vintagey blooming effect. And then what I would do when I pull out clarity, I would actually increase a little bit of the sharpness, like you can see right over here. So once again, this image looks pretty good. Now, the other thing that I wanna do is I wanna analyze the image closer and just to tell how sharp this lens is. And as you can see right here in this image, I'm shooting at f1.7. Now the 20mm of f1.7 is going to be very sharp, but it would actually lack a little bit of contrast. And in my opinion, you get the utmost contrast once you pass the f2.8 and on. Now look at this bird, and look at the edges around the bird. And right over here, we are at pixel level, as you can see. Look at the details of the eye, and even though this bird right now is starting to be the focus because of the f1.7 aperture, that looks pretty good. Now the other thing that I want to show you is the chromatic aberration control, and as you can see, the chromatic aberration is going to be minimal, and I would actually have to zoom in a lot just to show you a little bit of red and purple fringing right over here, right over there, right over there. But again, it's not that disturbing chromatic aberration that you get from some lenses, vintage lenses, and some of the cheaper end lenses. This image is actually really good. And in this case, I wouldn't even actually try to correct this chromatic aberration. Now let's start analyzing some of the details here. And as you can see, look, I can actually read the detail on this sticker, and it says Depth Hunter right over there. Look how sharp this symbol is, that banana right over there. It's a lot. Now we zoom out all the way and you can tell, how clean this image look and how sharp. Now we recovered some of the shadows, about 4 stops right over there. And let's take a look right over here. Noise is not a problem in here. I would be very comfortable printing this image the way it is. And I really like, the amount of details that we can capture even at f1.7. We're gonna move on to the next image right over here. And in this one, once again, I wanna show you how well you can capture color with this lens, of course, and this sensor, and the amount of detail that you get at even f1.7. The other thing that I wanna mention is that I use automatic white balance. And in my opinion, as far as I can tell, it does a pretty good job. What I wanna show you is how much detail and how sharp the f1.7 20mm is. Again, let's actually take a look over here. And as you can see, I'm at f1.7 right over there. My shutter speed was pretty much 1/8,000 of a second. And remember, this camera can go all the way in the hybrid or electronic shutter up to 1/16,000 of a second, which in my opinion is one of the greatest assets of this camera, because you can actually go and shoot in super bright situations without carrying any ND filter. And for me, to that, it is game changer. So again, the image is really clean, almost zero to no chromatic aberration. If I go like 20,000% zooming, I may see some red fringing in there, but I mean, that is something that I wouldn't even bother correcting at all, because look at this, very, very nice. Now let's move on to the next image. And in this one, we are gonna be testing human detection. Now I saw this guy walking in front of me, and I just pointed the camera at him and shot him really quick. I remember the box latched onto him super, super quick. And again, I'm shooting this person at f5.6. That's actually my sweet spot for this camera, f5.6. And we're gonna zoom in this man. Look at the detail in his hair, the detail on the skin. And the camera did a pretty good job of prioritizing focus on the person. We can see the background separation right there, even at 28mm f5.6. Now we're gonna move on to the next image, and we have, I believe, yes, we have another person right over here. Now this is gonna be super simple to fix, and in this case, because this guy is properly exposed, I would only drag the highlights to the point where they're not clipping anymore. The Q3 did a pretty good job at protecting those highlights, and as you can see, there's a lot of recoverability in there. If I actually go aggressively, you can see how that peak actually is not a flat line, meaning that there is a lot of data there. But in this case, I would only bring it probably at the most one stop below what the original result was. So this is original, and this is right now with one stop below. Again, if I zoom in this guy, probably there's a little bit of shake there. Yes, the shutter speed is 1/60. And one of the reasons that my shutter speed is 1/60 is because during the day, most of the time I like to have my shutter speed also automatic, and even my ISO. Now in this case, I'm fine with this image. It looks pretty good. Once again, if I would actually do a little bit of grading to this image right now really quick, just to show you, I would do that. I would actually bring the blue channel in the calibration panel a little bit towards the left, and then I'm probably gonna recover some of those shadows, and you know, I would call it a day. Some of the things that I do, like I mentioned before, sometimes I like to warm up the image a little bit more. And in this case, it was actually maybe what, 6 p.m., closer to sunset. So yes, probably this color will be more suitable for this type of image. Now, this is gonna be it for this image. We're gonna move on to another one. Now I had this guy, because I actually went to the marina walking over the bridge, pointed the camera at this guy, and as you can see, the camera, boom, it really latched onto this guy. My aperture is 5.6, so even this guy right here has pretty good details in the eye and the features of the face. And this guy, you know, is pretty happy, kind of like posing for the image. Once again, I mean, this image will be really nice, and I wouldn't do much if I want to post it in social media. Because of the contrast that this image carry, probably one of the things that I would do is I would try to see if this image would work best in black and white or color. And as you can see, this image does a pretty good job in black and white as well. But let's reset this thing and let's focus in the color of this image. Maybe just bring up the shadows a little bit more. How about there? And as you can see, pretty good job. Before and after, once again, f5.6, we get a little bit of background separation. We get tons of detail. My shutter speed in this situation was 1/4000 of a second. Yet again, the camera picked the shutter speed and kept the ISO at its base of 100. So we're gonna move on to another image. Now in this image, and this is so funny, we're gonna be talking about animal out of focus. And this is a test that I wanted to do because the fish is dead, and I don't know if cameras are actually designed to capture fish detection out of focus. I haven't heard of that, but I know that you can use these cameras underwater as well. So I actually pointed the camera at the fish, and I actually saw the camera drawing the box around the fish. So to my surprise, I thought that the camera would have prioritized the tail because it's what it was, you know, in front of the sensor first, the lens, I'm sorry. But when I zoom in this image, I'm actually gonna zoom in the tail. And as you can see, the tail is actually out of focus. And when we go to the eye and the head area is what is in focus. And the only thing that I was able to see is the box around the fish. And I was pretty impressed when I saw this because can we use this camera for fish out of focus? Apparently we can. Look at the amount of detail that we have. I am going to apply the auto exposure method in there. It darkened the image a little bit more than what I want to, and I would do probably this. I would actually do the blacks the way they were. Actually, I like it. And yeah, we'll probably bring the contrast a little bit below, and what I would increase is now the dehaze to bring a little bit of richer contrast. I'll bring down a little bit of the greens in this situation. I would actually go to the hues, make some of those yellows a little bit more orange, and even the yellows a little bit more orange. And then what I would do is I would come right over here and warm up this image a little bit more. So that to me is actually pretty good. If I'm in a pinch and I want to just deliver this image or upload it somewhere, that's what I would do to this image. Dead fish out of focus, something that we also have in the Leica Q3, and it's pretty impressive. All right, so now the sun is starting to go down. The sun is almost behind that pole. What I wanted to see is if, the sun would have some interference with the autofocusing performance, because that sun is actually blasting the lens. The first thing that we can see is that I don't use a hood in the Leica Q3. I use the camera as it is. So first of all, we're gonna see the control flare that you have in this lens, even when shooting directly into the sun. Now, my aperture is f11, and this would actually help us understand sun stars. Now, this lens is not gonna give you well-defined sun stars. This is pretty much what you will get when it comes to sun stars. It just doesn't define the spikes of the sun star. I was actually wondering if this animal was gonna be in focus. I did see the box drawn around the animal. The eyes is in complete focus. I'm gonna do the auto exposure so we can tell the image a little bit more. Also, look at the level of noise. Even though a lot of the bird was actually in shade, look how clean those reflections are. This is what it was before. This is what it is right now. In this case, I was aiming for the animal to be exposed, and this is what I mentioned before, that sometimes I swap between highlight weighted metering mode and getting the subject properly exposed. And this is a great example. I have the sun blasting. So, all right, so we're gonna move to more dramatic images. And this one is pretty dramatic. We actually save this image, but look what happened when I actually pull the shadow slider. Boom, everyone comes to light. We basically turn this nighttime photo into a daylight photo. This is just ridiculous. Look at the amount of details that we're capturing. The sun was completely gone behind the horizon already, and this was really, really black. That's why they have those lights on. Now let's actually go the before and after. Take a look at that. Complete darkness. This is just complete darkness in here. Complete darkness in here, and look at the before. And after, I'm sorry. You can see the detail there. I don't know. There is a bag, tons of detail. Look at the sharpness of those rods right over there. Look at, this guy's actually out of focus. It looks like the focus is somewhere in there. And look at the level of noise. The level of noise is completely acceptable. One of the things that I like about the grain is that it's more monochrome. It's more like film grain in my opinion, and not so much of RGB noise that then it's really hard to actually remove. Now, if I actually would come here and apply the standard denoising feature, not the AI denoising, which it does an amazing job. As you can see, probably I would do something like that. And this image is actually incredible. Now, once again, take a look at this and take a look at that. Come down here with the blue channel, drag it a little bit towards this direction. And I just love this, exaggerating those oranges and bringing the sky more towards the teal. I would actually force a little bit more because the sun is down. The ambience was pretty warm at this time. And last but not least, I would actually bring this guy right over here. Now, I tend to actually spend some time grading my images, but I also want to show you how easy it is just to move a couple of sliders and get a really pleasing image. The sky is pretty good. Here in the exposure, we are going to see that we have some of the, of course, the shadows underexposed, but I think they are underexposed. They don't bother me. Let's actually drop a linear gradient. One of the things that I would like to do in here. So what I would do right now, maybe bring the exposure down a little bit. Now, if you want to bring that exposure down, another thing that you could do, and this is with any value, use the arrow keys up to go higher, down to go lower, and that's going to give you 0.1, I believe, or so of adjustment. Again, with minimal efforts, you can actually correct this image and turn it into something really pleasing to the eye. This was the before, this was the after. In my opinion, incredible, and incredible how much the image held up together with very low noise. And as you guys have seen, the image quality coming from the Leica Q3 is outstanding. Now, I can say exactly the same thing from the Leica Q2 because I own that camera, and I gotta say that the image quality is very, very similar. But Leica has taken things to the next level when it comes to the autofocusing performance of this camera. Even though I consider the Leica Q2 a camera that was very capable when it came to autofocus, having phase detection autofocus on top of contrast detection does shine in the Leica Q3, and you guys have seen in some of the scenes that I've shown right here in this video. Animal detection, object detection, human detection, and the camera performs really, really good. So one of the main reasons you may want to consider a Leica Q3 or even a Leica Q2, at least in my opinion, is because of the lens attached to this body. The Summilux 28mm f1.7 that you get with this camera is one of the best 28mm lenses out there, period. Now, I actually got to shoot before with the Summilux 20mm f1.4, and I was thinking about saving to buy the lens. The lens is over $8,000 and adapted to my Sony cameras. That was before my M11. But once again, you know, the 28mm here is now my preferred focal length for walking around street photography. And I used to be a 35mm lens guy. Now, the fact that now we have that additional resolution, even with a Q2, 47 versus 60 megapixels in the Q3, that's allow you to recompose in post and get that 35mm crop if you want, or even 50. So for that reason, you know, I saw the Leica Q2 and I went with the Leica Q3 to get that extra resolution. And to be honest with you, the tilt screen on this camera is a feature that I've been using a lot. And as you have seen, because of some of the angles, I've used it a lot in this photo shoot. So guys, if you want to know anything about this camera, have any particular comment, or you may want me to do a tutorial in how to grade footage from this camera, images, I'm sorry, drop them in the comments down below. And until then, I will see you in the next video. Thank you for watching.